Hello, everybody out there. Hope everybody can see me live now. We've just begun our latest edition of CSC Live. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. We have a special day today that's sort of more technically complex than we've done in the past, but I think it should be pretty fun for everybody. Today's session is talking about remote grading and the realities of remote grading that we've sort of started to embrace now that we've all been working from home the last few weeks. Some of you may remember maybe about 11 weeks ago now, the very first CSC Live we did was me. That was the last time I was actually on camera. And we talked about remote grading. And one of our guests today, which is Mark Kueper, the colorist from Technicolor Toronto, was actually joined me on the phone to talk about remote grading. And that was very early days of this process for us as DPs. And since then, a lot's happened. I've been doing it more. My other co-guest here, Gavin Smith, has been doing it for a while now too. So what we're going to do today is actually take a look at our working processes between myself with Joanne Rourke, my colorist at Deluxe Toronto. Joanne and I have been doing Expanse together since the first season. And normally I would be sitting in Deluxe with Joanne, working together here in Toronto. But of course, since the pandemic has begun, that hasn't been possible. So we've been using technology that we've been using for a few years now so that our showrunner, Narain in LA, could watch what we're doing. But now we're using that same technology locally, so I can work here from home and continue to do post on our show for season 5. And I know that Gavin has been doing the same thing for his show, and now he's doing the same thing with Mark Kueper through Technicolor, and they're using their version of this technology, which is remote streaming. So I guess the interesting thing for us is that in season 4 of Expanse, we started going HDR, and at that point we hadn't done a remote stream of HDR to our producer in LA, our showrunner. But season 4 was our first time doing HDR, and we were able to do HDR through our remote streaming method to LA. And so we've continued to do that. And now this year I'm working from home with a calibrated monitor here, which is HDR, and I'm seeing 4K HDR over that stream. And Gavin's doing a similar method with an iPad Pro that's been calibrated to so he can see what Mark is seeing simultaneously. So that's kind of the general gist of what we'll be talking about today. And as part of that discussion, we have Gary Brown, who's the picture operations manager at Deluxe Toronto, who's been working with us on Expanse for several seasons now. Gary's going to talk a little bit about what the workflow that we use through Deluxe. And then after that, Brian Reed, who is the technical operations manager at Technicolor Toronto, he's going to explain the same thing from Technicolor's standpoint. So Gary, maybe if you can unmute yourself, or I'll unmute you if you like. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Jeremy. Alrighty. I'm just going to try to share my screen with you here. Just 1 second. Are you guys able to see that?
Yeah, that's great. There you are.
Perfect. But thanks again, Jeremy. Remote grading, we've been doing that for some time now. And as Jeremy mentioned before, pre-COVID-19, things were slightly different. Both the colorist and the client had full access to the facility. So they could come in and they would have a fully calibrated monitor, high quality images, a full suite ready to go, and they could collaborate quite easily. So with that, any remote work from home live grading solution that we put forth would have to allow the client to have a very similar experience as a traditional attended session. So it had to be real-time, collaborative, instantaneous, and an efficient workflow that the showrunners, the DPs, directors have come accustomed to working in-house at the post facility while being in a remote setting. With that, the streaming solution ideally needed to be system agnostic, so it had to be fast, high quality transmission, very low latency and dependable connection, both on our end as well as on the client. So we leverage some premium technologies such as Streambox Chroma 4K, Chroma Plus, the Chroma X, and Niveon TVIP Virtuoso, as well as SohoNet, Clearview Flex, and the various other software products. One of the things we had to make sure with that is the stream itself. We have to stream to a color calibrated environment that ideally is identical in display technology and calibration specs to what they're used to. So basically the image quality is extremely important. It needed to be high enough quality to judge clear color images. In our current work from home situation, our colorists would set up a remote live color session with a DP from their home, and our engineering team would then customize a solution for that particular need. So whether that review is going to be over an iPad Pro, HD SDR, 4K, as Jeremy mentioned, he's getting a 4K feed on a calibrated OLED TV, or even up to a full reference mastering monitor like an X300. And while today we're not really talking about sound, we also employ the same sort of technology for sound, which could be anything from 5.1, 7.1 to an Atmos mix. So low to high internet bit rate also determines the type of solution. The latency of the stream, where lower times equal less delay, but it sacrifices a bit of the motion quality, where higher latency equals a better motion quality, but slightly longer delay. We can also do this, the stream via Streambox cloud to many systems. That could be to a browser window on a Mac Windows client if we're doing an SDR review, and it allows anyone located around the world to join in the review session. So the biggest challenge we have with most of this is just making everything plug and play. There's limited IT intervention, and also it has to be easy for the client to set up. And of course, most importantly, the data needs to be secure and encrypted. And for that, we have a VPN set up that allows our colorists to communicate back to the facility in a very secure way over the internet. This flow chart that you're looking at is a brief layout of what's happening today with our colorist Joanne and Jeremy, of course. Prior to our having to move and change things the way we do, not having access to the facility, we had to deploy some things very quickly. And our engineering team for this particular show, the Expanse, had to set up a review platform where they had to scale from one streaming system to about 6 in a very short time. So they had to gather all the equipment, calibrate the monitor, get things shipped, and also, we were all social distancing at that time, so it wasn't easy to get into people's houses. We had to make sure everything was working before we deployed it. Installation was completely on the creative side, as in the case with Jeremy here. We send his equipment, and basically he had to set it up at home. He's pretty technical, so that helped quite a bit. The color grading system for our colorists, we had to deploy a full color grading system in our home as well. So that meant a full reference monitor, a full color workstation with panels, and a system that she's used to working with from the office right in our home, ready to go. And essentially on the creative side, Jeremy, he would, like Jeremy mentioned before, his showrunner, which is in LA, has a similar setup to him where he's got a calibrated monitor. Jeremy himself has a calibrated monitor, and I believe they have a VFX team here locally that has a similar thing. And as well, the there are a few local producers that also wanted to be on the feed, and they're working from an iPad. So what would happen is our engineers set up a system where our colorists would stream once to the cloud, and everyone else would be able to pull that stream down to their devices in real time. They could all collaborate completely in sync, and they could be a part of that creative session as Joanne and Jeremy would work, and they would hear everything that is happening and see it live. That's pretty much you know, a very simple workflow of some of the things that we would do in this particular situation. Jeremy, I'm going to send it back to you.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, and just I guess it made me think, just to add to that, is that I should also say thanks to Gary Mueller, our post supervisor, because he actually helped facilitate some of what we did today to get this session going, as far as getting us the clips we needed from the Expanse. And also in all this process, you know, for post houses, it's been obviously a lot of work to juggle their normal workflow and suddenly send everything out of house into people's homes and all that. So Gary was the one who actually, Gary Mueller was the one who actually delivered the LG C9 monitor to my place here, and which Deluxe had actually calibrated. So I think they got 3 of those monitors. They calibrated them all together in the same room with Joanne's Sony X300, comparatively speaking, and then they were shipped out. So I got one of them. One was sent to LA to our showrunner, and our VFX supervisor here in Toronto received one, along with the Streambox hardware. It looks like a PVR. It's a little box. And I actually have it over here, so you can see it right there. So it was kind of plug and play. It was actually quite simple. Once I plugged it into an Ethernet port, it pretty much just, you turn it on and then and there it is. So that's you know, it's a lot of work for everybody involved, but it's been working quite well. And we just use Zoom we turn that on during the session, and I point this camera over to the monitor, and then if I have to show Joanne anything, I can just go up to the monitor and say, can you make this area, you know, brighter or darker? So that's kind of how we've been doing it. I'll hand it over to Brian from Technicolor to explain their process.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'll just again share my screen here.
There you go.
There we go. Should see that now. So yeah, thanks to Jeremy and the CSC for allowing us to be part of this series. In the time of COVID-19, these weekly presentations have been very interesting and insightful. Today, Gavin Smith, I'm just going to change, and Technicolor senior colorist Mark Kueper are going to be demonstrating the use of remote color grading through an app we've just released called Techstream. And they're going to be using materials from a project they graded together called Wynonna Earp. For those of you unfamiliar with the title, Wynonna was launched in 2016 on Sci-Fi in the US, and here it airs on CTV's Sci-Fi channel. And the first 2 seasons are available here on Netflix. 724 Films and Image Comics are the production comics companies, and when premiered, it was rated by Variety magazine as a much-watched new show, and the 2nd season was also listed in their top 20 shows of 2017. Wynonna Earp has just finished shooting their 4th season. All seasons have been shot in Calgary, with Technicolor providing near-set dailies. So this is just sort of a layout from the production side of things, so what happened there, the camera details, and what we were doing as far as the color workflow there. The good thing, obviously, is we're able to put some pretty decent hardware near set there and be able to produce dailies, do the LTO backups and everything there, and then upload from there the material to editorial, which was here still in Toronto, and obviously the streaming files to all the executives around. The post, you know, pretty straightforward again, conform here in Toronto, high-res material from the camera shoot, and grade again with Gavin and Mark in a traditional method. In years past, they would meet together in the suite, and how nice that was. And then, of course, producers and post-supervisor would do the final pass on that and things, packaging and restriping things. So just wanted to, much like what Gary was saying, there's several technologies that can be doing the remote grading, and we've been doing remote grading certainly for several years. I think the difference now, obviously, is not being able to, you know, be able to share that closeness and point at the same screen, et cetera, and doing it remotely makes it a little bit more difficult. So we were very sort of fortunate, I think, that we were just going to launch this Techstream app, which is an app available from the Apple Store, and to download it onto, specifically works best on an iPad Pro, but any Retina screen works well. The difference there is that if you're on an iPad Pro, you won't get any stuttering and things. But then you can have multiple user over just regular generic internet, as opposed to doing dark fiber between your sets or having to send hardware out to our clients and things. So that app was going to be released at EDB this year. And now, of course, it was becoming very, very, very handy to be able to do that. So all the other technologies we're still in use and things, but the advantage for us of the Techstream is not being able to have to send any hardware out to our client. And the inability essentially to have multiple monitors be calibrated in someone's houses and making sure everything's all set up and things. The Techstream's been really good. So what is Techstream? So very, very simple, just sort of app that basically allows you to use either Wi-Fi and or LTE, which is great if you've got poor Wi-Fi, knowing the demands of Wi-Fi on everyone's houses these days. It's been pretty difficult to sometimes get that. So it can use LTE as well, and it can support, we say 6, but we've certainly had experience with it being several more people than that and things. And you essentially just download the app and log into it on your iPad Pro and put in your email address and a key that we send you individually keyed, because again, security, and it of course is a stream that's been fully secured. So very similar to what we were doing before. Like I said, you download the app. An hour before the session, we send out the email with the 5-digit keys to each individual user. They're unique keys and only valid for that session. You launch the Techstream app, logging it in, and then basically you're into there. The advantage we're also seeing too is we're using this system extensively on multiple projects, as is our other Technicolor locations in London and Los Angeles. And if you're a showrunner that has more than one, or a distributor that has more than one project, you might have simultaneous streams. So you can literally just go to your iPad app and select the stream that you want to, and you can log in and out of the projects very simply. So it's worked very, very well. And Mark Kueper, or whatever colorist is doing the session, has an iPad Pro beside his calibrated X300, and we're finding an extremely close match to those, so he can see if there's any issues with the stream or any compression and things, and we can deal with that directly on a one-to-one. So he's seeing exactly what our clients are seeing. So that's worked out very, very well. The one thing I want to mention is the quality and smoothness of the footage you're going to see today is not what, of course, our clients would be seeing on their iPads or televisions. The feed, obviously, from Facebook and Instagram is very compressed and is certainly not even 24 frames a second. So take that in mind, but I think it's a really good representation when we really appreciate Jeremy allowing us to be part of this today. Thanks, Jeremy. I'll toss it back to you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so it's, similar systems, different gear, but ultimately we're doing the same thing. Obviously, I know that Mark and I have worked together in the past, and I know that Gavin has a long relationship with Mark. Part of the process that we as DPs kind of rely on is that relationship with a colorist. And Joanne and I go back to the beginning of season 1 of Expanse, so we know that show really well together, and that's kind of a really an important part of this workflow. It hasn't really changed. I mean, really, we're still talking to each other. We're still doing the same things, and we're seeing those changes virtually in real time. So, when we're talking about like minute adjustments of color and, tone, it's important to be able to see those things happen quickly and in a way that you kind of can trust is that Joanne and I or Mark and Gavin you're seeing the same thing, together. So you're making the same judgment calls. So today we kind of set this up so that we can show feeds from a screen share from both what Joanne and I are doing and what Mark and Gavin are doing. Of course, it's a preview. it's not exactly what we're seeing here on the high quality monitors, but for the purposes of this CSC Live, it will allow everyone to kind of just see the workflow. Of course, it's compressed, it's Zoom, it's Facebook crunched and YouTube and all that stuff. But it does give you a good sense of it. You know, occasionally there are little glitches that happen with the feed. It kind of restores itself. So if we see that happening, I mean, that's kind of what happens occasionally. We're at the mercy of the internet in that case. But Joanne and I were going to look at a couple things. I have two things to show. One is there's a short film that I've been working on for the last 4 years that's complete now. And Deluxe did me a favor and helped me out to finish that. It's called Footsteps, which is a film about a team of Foley artists in Uxbridge, Andy Malcolm and his team there. So Joanne and I recently, it was actually the last thing we did together in person in March. We graded it at Deluxe together. And then once I started doing the Expanse grading about a month or so later, we did subsequent passes of the film together because we had the setup to do that remotely. So I'm going to screen share that. Just give me a moment here. You guys see that?
Yeah.
That'd be great. So here's a grab or a scene from Footsteps, and I'll show you over here that I have it on this monitor too. So if I'll just move over to where I would normally sit so I can be closer to it. But this film was shot with a combination of Alexa Mini and C200 over the course of like 4 years. So, and in fact, Andy's Hero interview was shot with both cameras like years apart in the same place. So Joanne and I had to kind of match the two, which I think we did pretty well. So maybe Joanne, do you want to show everybody at home, like right now we're looking at, this is like the finished look that we came up with, shooting, this is in Uxbridge at their facility. You want to show us like just the log?
There it is.
The log. And this was the Alexa Mini. And maybe show us, Joanne, do you want to talk just briefly about like how you would apply the LUT to start and then work from there?
Sure. So
there's Joanne. Say hi, Joanne.
that's just with the Alexa LUT straight up. But now you see it. So that's kind of a base starting point that I would use mostly if I'm working with an Alexa camera. And that allows me just to have a good starting point, and I'll take it from there usually.
So it's basically like you're just giving it like a general starting look so that you've got like a good curve built into the image, so there's a place to kind of push and pull it from, right?
Yeah, it's using the color science from the camera.
Right. So in this case, I know that like as we were working on it, Joanne and I were trying to bring back the sky a little more because you can see how this was one of those days where the sky's almost burned out.
That's what it off. I have a key put into the sky to help bring it back. Some of the cloud detail.
Toggle it on.
Put a bit of a window just to add some coolness into the sky.
And I think we sort of like added a bit of blue into the blacks, didn't we?
We did. I think throughout. Most of it's fairly warm overall.
Yeah.
A lot of the material was like old typewriters, that type of thing. So we're kind of going for a Kodak feel at times.
Yeah, and I actually, because Andy had done a film in the late 70s called Track Stars, which a lot of people may have seen about Foley, which was actually shot by Mark Irwin, crazily enough, who hosted one of these a couple weeks ago. I kind of went with that as a reference of like kind of slightly older 70s, like crunchier look. You'll see that in the interviews coming up, but this is actually Sandra Fox right here. She's one of the Foley artists at Footsteps, and she's outside playing with a piece of rope, as they do.
Rolling through it.
How was the key, Joanne, where you had it in the sky?
Pardon me?
Toggle the key on.
That's the key on. That's the key off.
Like as in like show the keying area, like in your
Oh, sure.
everyone can see kind of like what you're selecting.
There you go.
There you go. Because the trick with this kind of thing is obviously doing it in such a way, selecting it so that you don't kind of read it going into the sky and like looking like it's the trees are posterized and that kind of thing. So that's one of those things where it's very like subject to taste.
And then here's the bottom. We just brought down the level just so your eye would go to her more.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Because again, this is complete documentary style. This whole thing was very documentary. So, you know, having that kind of control allowed us to sort of shape the look throughout the course of the short.
Right.
What else did we do in this one?
Let's see, Andy.
Yeah, let's see Andy. So there's Andy. And so we have both Andy interviews here, right?
Yes, we have the one.
This was on the MIDI. And then the latter one, which we'll see next, was shot on the C200. So there's the C200.
There's a large part that's matching just some of the color tones.
Yeah, the green didn't read the same on the C200 on his shirt. And he actually wore the exact same shirt like 4 years later. So, so Joanne was able to kind of bring the green back in the C200 to look more like the way the Alexa saw the green. So this is literally the same exact spot, 4 years apart, two different cameras. It's mostly the natural window light. We had a little bit of a light mat off to the side just to kind of pick up the window light. But that was basically it. It was like a light mat and the windows.
We brought up his little running shoe in the corner there.
There's that little shoe in the corner. We gave a little window for that so people could see it more. That was pretty cool.
What it other than be sprays. There's the log image there.
Yes. It gives you an idea of like the range that the Alexa has, because you can see in the background that bright area where like the water cooler is, how much information is there.
And then that's just the LUT.
That's the Airy LUT.
Just turn everything back on. That's everything back on. We didn't stray too far. Just a bit of fine tuning. I think we could pull this in the blacks again.
Yeah, and I know that because the first break we did was kind of really contrasty, and then after I looked at it again, I was like, oh, maybe I went too far. And then we're doing some of our expanse grading. We did another pass on this monitor here, and we backed it off and kind of softened it a little bit. And I think we ended up in a really good.
Here's an alternate look, just for fun.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was one of our experimental looks.
This is if you wanted to do something moody. There's so much range that you have once you have put that LUT on, then away you go.
What's the was it the shot of Goro in the
Goro.
There's his interview.
Yeah.
So we had
Straight.
there's the log image. And as you know, it was very warm. Like their studios are lit with like all tungsten light, so I kind of embraced that look and matched my own light matte color with that, and just kind of cooled it down a little bit so it wasn't quite as warm. Knowing that when I was in with Joanne, I was going to suck back some of that oranginess because they're very you know, tungsten light bulb kind of situation in their studios. So yeah, I think we darkened the table in the foreground. We gave Goro's face a bit of a lift because it was you know, he was kind of falling into shadow too heavily on the one side. Yeah, there's the table.
What else? I think we darkened the behind him there.
Yeah, we selected the background. Can you actually, Joanne? Can you bring up your shapes to show the shape?
Oh, the shape. Okay. Then you'll see my math skills. Oh, just go to the window page here.
I believe, Mark, you're the same way. Like Joanne and Mark both use a tablet to draw their windows so that they can kind of make it any shape they want, which is great.
It's just for the armor in the background. And
These guys do Vikings, or have done Vikings, so they have a lot of in that working on it when I was there. So they had a lot of like swords and armor and, you know, glassware that they were using to make all that kind of sound.
Yeah, I think we just wanted to highlight, make sure you could still see it.
Yeah, that's a nice little detail. So we were like, you know, really the only light I had in this set or in this studio was the one light mat. So it was kind of like balancing the house lights with a light mat.
Just as an example, not that you would ever do this, but you could change the color of a shirt if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
Not that extreme, but
it shows you the level of control you have with grabbing it.
exactly. Yeah.
We also, I remember we did for this, one of the things the first time I looked at it after we did our first pass, I thought that we were too hot with the highlights. So we did kind of like a softening of the highlights overall, just to kind of bring it so his skin wasn't so.
Right, let me find that. So yeah, that's where we were, I think, before.
Yeah.
Bring it into more of the mood of the film when we softened it.
we went to that kind of lower level, which I think was a better match to everything else. It, for whatever reason, his interview stuck out to me as being too crunchy and too poppy.
It ended up in a nice place.
Yeah. And of course, the little lift on his left eye that we did to kind of bring up the shadow side of his face, Joanne tracked that so that, you know, as he moves around, it follows his face, obviously.
Here, I'll turn it on again. You can see it following.
Yeah.
Nothing too crazy, but
I mean, the tracking software is a huge benefit. I mean, that's something I would, you know, I was going to mention later, but, you know, when Joanne and I set up our, the sessions, because we usually typically do a day for Expanse by ourselves. And then a few days later, we'll do the session and we'll play back for the showrunner and the VFX team. So we try and, as much as possible, faces that we know will likely want to be tweaked, we pre-window them and pre-track them so that if there's the question of like, oh, can we just bring up that one face? It's already done, you know, so there's we don't have to wait for the tracking system to kind of do its work. It's already kind of in place. But even that being said, if a you know, last minute request comes up, the tracking software is so fast that it doesn't, you don't wait very long for it, really.
yeah, we try to get everything in place as much as possible, including the mats and the visual effects.
Let's see that the darker studio moment.
Oh, okay.
The one where he's, or what do you have next lined up?
I think it was,
Yeah, that's good.
or there was this one.
Right, and this was an example where we had the monitor on the left that Sandra's looking at was like burned out. So we had to track the monitor in to kind of bring back the detail in it. And also her glasses, the monitor red is like purple in her glasses. So Joanne and I like kind of worked to track her face to like the glasses to make the reflection not be like bright purple.
Right.
And again, the overall warmth of
Got the ceiling down. Right. Yeah, brought her up. So take the thing. Yeah, it's the glasses.
yeah, there's the glasses.
And I think, yeah, then we did a softening overall at the end.
And that was my second pass. It was like, oh, it's too crunchy. Let's just back everything off contrast wise. So we did like a softer pass on it, which.
There's the log. See it.
And I believe this was the C200 at this point. What was that? Oh yeah, that was one of the monitor tweaks. You want to jump to the Goro in the studio, the darker one? And after that, we can switch to Expanse.
Okay.
This was an example of like, you know, it was already a pretty moody room, but I wanted to take it even further. So we kind of shaped it in around, like, you know, we darkened the ceiling and the floor.
Actually, this one we left straight up because we were gonna.
We're gonna do that for this, and we were gonna like show the ability.
Do that now.
And then what if you soften that even more, Joanne? Like just so it's a little more feathered. Yeah, that's it.
We were gonna bring the car out of it.
Do the floor too, like where that cable is on the floor.
What about the cable?
Yeah, like
I'll
right
bring it.
there, like where that cable is.
Sure. Out of it.
That's Goro Koyama, who's a super masterful Foley artist.
We're gonna bring the car a little bit.
Oh, that's the door, Joanne?
Oh, what is that? Is that a car grill or?
The door, yeah, that's it. And pull some of the detail up in the door. That's good. That's pretty cool. Obviously, the trick with that kind of thing is not to go so far that you make the blacks milky, but I think we're in a pretty good place there.
And then we thought we might bring up his footsteps a bit.
We've got this
So
big contact across.
just grades there. Reset windows
There you go.
like that.
Maybe just back it off a little bit. Yeah, right there. That's good. That's great.
Cooling it off a little bit.
And what if you just go? You just add a little bit more coolness, right?
Yeah.
What if you go just a little more like cyan in the blacks?
Sure. There.
There. And then maybe just like now, just like an overall, like bring it down overall slightly. Yeah, that's cool.
The difference there.
How's that feel in motion? That's good. Can you run it? Just loop that shot.
Well, there we go. Just with a bit of a delay. Here we go.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, the windows feel good. I'm not sensing them on the top and bottom.
It probably would take some time to track them.
Pretty good though, and the feet look pretty good too. Cool. Why don't we jump to Expanse as our last show and tell here.
Okay.
I guess the one thing to note with Expanse, which is kind of a useful tool, is that for anything that we do that has VFX elements in it, the VFX team delivers us mats for all the elements. So, which is really helpful in the color correction process, that if we need to balance a particular item, object, we can select it on its own, so that Joanne doesn't have to draw a window or a key for that one thing, which is obviously time consuming and often doesn't look as good, obviously. So the VFX team delivers mats to go with each element, which is really great. It allows us that separate control. Especially in these space shots, it's often the case that we need to control the highlights and shadows of the ships, for example, compared to the space background, because the black of the star field is a very specific reference point for us that, our showrunner and the team in general is very particular about that black point in the star field. So we need to always make sure that our VFX elements sit properly against that they feel like they're actually there, not lifted on top of it. So this is an example of that, where I know that, because Joanne, can you show that example of how we would bring the highlights down on the ships typically?
Sure. So, yeah, Harry is quite particular. He understands all the physics behind everything.
Yeah.
And the speeds and how much light there would be in space, depending on where they are located at the time.
Because we're always having to compensate for like how far away they are from the sun, because it gets weaker as they get further away from the sun. And typically our VFX team gives us the elements with more information, like brighter than they should be, so that we can always bring them back, because otherwise going the other direction doesn't work as well.
These are some instances I don't use LUTs. In this case, when we receive the space shots, just because Marion likes to see that added detail in the mid-range and the low mids.
That's right.
Sometimes it's just easier to turn off the LUT and start from scratch.
So you did the little highlight toggle there?
Oh, let me do the toggle. Are you seeing it?
Yep, there it is. Yep. Yeah, so you just brought them down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Could you grab the moons that are around Illis there and just show us just if you wanted to bring the moons down as a group?
Bring it down?
Make the moons, like, bring their highlights down.
Okay. Have you seen that?
Yep. Go even, yeah, there they are. Go a little for, yeah, that's pretty good. Oh yeah, I think everybody can probably see that. I can see it happening here too. So why don't we jump to the next shot?
Let's go to, this is a pretty cool shot. Let's run it.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know what the speed will be, but it gives you an idea. This is the Rossi about to land on Ilus, correct?
Accelerating, basically a SpaceX style landing.
So the clouds are supposed to be green tinged according to the script. Try to read the, just so I know all the different spaceship names, that type of thing. So when the rain asks me to go to a certain spot, mat, I'll know. And I try to label them as well ahead of time.
Yeah, because you can end up with like dozens of mats sometimes, right? Depending on the shot.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I double and triple them up. And if I just need a certain area of the map, I'll just show you what we have on this particular shot.
Sure. It's a really fine balance, I find, with the VFX stuff, because it's really that balance of making it look like it's actually part of the shot, if it's mixed in within camera or if it's on its own.
Exactly. So ideally it should be fully integrated.
Yeah.
Really, visual effects does such a great job. We're just really doing minor tweaks.
We're just balancing it into final position, but I mean, they do such a great job of these things.
Yeah, it's pretty. We get visual effects from at least, I think this year we're up to 6 visual or effects houses.
Yeah, that's right.
Last year we got up to 9.
It's on.
If I did mention Mats Eunice, our senior online editor, who keeps everything in line and makes sure I get all my mats in time for our online sessions. Shout out to Mats.
Yeah, Mats is our online guy. He does a great job getting everything up for us.
The clouds.
Yeah, I remember we also were like fine tuning the red of the ship to get the new paint job had to look a certain way.
Yes.
Didn't we, when we actually went to the landing, when we had the ship, when the steam is kind of overtaking the camera, we were playing with that because we were trying to get the steam at the right level too.
So. Yeah, this was the first time we saw the Rossi painted.
Yeah, this was the new paint job. We'd never actually seen it before painted like this.
Yeah, we got it to a level I think that everyone was happy with.
Yeah, it kind of came in a little bit too saturated, and we just sort of grabbed it and kind of backed it off a bit. Do you have that the landing moment when the steam kind of overtakes the camera?
I believe it's this shot.
Yeah, this is the one.
Okay. I'll just loop it.
Yeah, this was tricky getting the steam to all look blended in. And of course, this had to tonally match the real location, which was a quarry we shot in Dundas, Ontario. So we were kind of like, this is entirely a VFX shot, but then there are elements that in subsequent shots that are real in-camera moments at the quarry mixed with these elements. So we had to make sure these match tonally. But, what did we have to the steam? Yeah, we had the ship, and then we had something on the steam itself. We remember we darkened the steam down because it was reading too bright.
Yeah, that's where it was when it came in.
Can you run it for a sec with the brighter version and then show the darker version?
Sure.
Yeah, that's the brighter steam.
I think I also put a transition in, like it's brighter at the beginning and then
Darker at the end, right? Yeah, let's see the darker version. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, just sort of like it basically made the steam more of like a dark thing that overtakes the camera.
right, and then we had a mat for the rocks, but I don't think we did too much with those.
No, we didn't need to. What should we look at on the surface to show like maybe one of the drone shots matching in with the walking?
Oh, like one of these or
Yeah.
earlier?
Yeah, this is good because then this will cut in with them like one of the ground level shots. So this was actual DJI the Zen Muse X7 camera, and this is pretty much a real shot. This is the the quarry actually looks like this. It's all the kind of mineral tailing ponds that are like weird cobalt blue colors. And then this is our heroes. They're actually walking on that. That's the place they're walking from the drone shot. And that's the same area. I think they kind of sped them up a little bit, but that really is the actual landscape, which is totally bizarre. And then for this, we also, we switched to anamorphic for Illis itself. And then now we're back to the drone. So that was a Steadicam shot with the Mini, and now we're on a drone shot. And that set is real. We were very lucky here because as the drone rises up at this last part of the shot, the sun actually came out like perfectly at that moment. And then all the coverage we do for the scene coming up, the sun is out. So we got lucky that basically the natural transition really happened, and it gave us the excuse of like, okay, now it's sunny when they arrive at the settlement.
Didn't you say it was really windy as well at the time? So the drone really.
That camera like performed how it did because it was super windy, and I mean that's one of the benefits of these smaller drones is they can withstand those higher winds. I mean this is Tom Comet from Drone Boy, did this work, and he's great and has done a lot of drone work for us. And I think VFX wise, all they really did for that shot was remove trees on top of the ridgeline.
Right.
Because there were trees kind of up along the top here, a few trees. We didn't want to see the sort of earth-like trees, but we kept the shrubberies that were there, and then we did like a little bit of a green tweak too, right, Joanne? To kind of
I went through all the shots and toned down the green and yellows.
Yeah, so we kind of embraced that there was greenery, but it wasn't as earthly green. It was sort of a little more
uninviting.
yeah, exactly. Can you show us the log version of this shot?
Oh, sure.
Go back to the, yeah, there you go. Gives you a good sense of it.
Samrin's asking if we did a bluish looking camera. So no.
No, this was, I mean, primarily on this, I don't use any coloration filters. That's, you can see the original log. Go back to that again, Joanne. So that's what you're seeing there is basically what the camera shot, which you can see is pretty neutral. And I believe we balanced the camera, including the drone, at 5600 Kelvin outside and just keep it totally clean, so that we can kind of steer it around as we need to, you know, in the color correction. Why don't we jump to one last one, and then I'll hand it over to Mark.
What one would you like to look at? Do you want the mats? Something with mats, or just?
Mats.
Pardon?
Yeah, sure, something with mats.
Let's see if there's anything inside that we did. I'll just show you the look of the Rosie and like.
Yeah, sure.
You're there.
So this is inside the ship that was landing.
The blue look. That's pretty much how it looks straight up.
Right. So the Rosie kind of interior, their hero ship has a few different default looks. This is kind of the standard, I guess.
Here are just the designs.
Oh yeah, let's see that again. A little eye lift. Can you toggle that again?
Oh.
There we go. That's Holden.
Here's getting ready to land.
Yeah, this is kind of backwards in time in that sequence. This is right before they landed.
Let's see what else we have here. Give us some mats for these shots. I have a mat for that. A mat for the runes. It's the first time we see the runes, I think.
We have a mixture of like in-camera monitors that are actually shot in camera, and then some are VFX. So it's for us, it's a total mix of the two. So it's a matter of making sure that the ones that are comped look like the ones that were shot in camera. Because that's a mixture of both in camera and, because sometimes when we shoot it from a story-wise standpoint, we don't have the graphics done yet because the story, like they need to tweak it in the editing stage. So sometimes we commit to it in camera and sometimes we don't. And sometimes even when we shoot that we've committed to from a story standpoint, it changes a little bit later. So they have to recomp in an element. So it's always a matter of matching what the real camera ones look like.
So I did end up putting one, oh, where is it? Here it is. A little window on his face for you, Jeremy.
Yeah, you can see how subtle. The nice thing about all this is that, you know, we can be so subtle with these little facelifts. I mean, that's the main challenge with you know, the beauty of the technology we have grading wise, you can do anything, but you also have to be careful that you're not tipping your hand to it, you know, and windowing faces is a tricky one where you have to be careful that you don't feel the face being lifted. And, you know, so for us, we're, you know, I think we've gotten pretty good at trying to find that balance of, like, you know, pulling someone's face out of the shadow a little bit without feeling it as they move around.
Yeah, try not to make it too obvious.
Yeah, I mean, really the audience shouldn't even be aware of it, but it's just enough that you can kind of sense it.
Yeah, just subtle shaping really. Yeah.
Well, and that's the beauty of being able to draw your own shapes too, is that you can kind of customize it to the person's face.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I have what I do is here, I'll show you quickly. We'll get out of here. Just add a window to his face. So I have some presets that on the screen that I have built in, and then I can modify them how I like.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Soften them up, and then say we wanted to add a bit more.
And part of it is timing too, because sometimes you want it to turn on in a certain part of the shot and then go away for another part. So it's a matter of choosing that moment.
Yes. So we do a lot of that.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to show, Joanne, before I hand it over to Mark?
I think that's good. I think we covered everything we were hoping to cover.
Well, if anybody has questions, of course they can write in, and Christina will forward them. We can come back to this, and I'll let Mark do his thing. I'll just walk back and change over the settings here. Pardon me. Thanks for that, Joanne. All right, Mark, I'm going to hand it over to your screen.
Someone's asking me, oh, can you hear me still?
Yep.
I'll just answer one question. How much time would I spend finessing each shot? It just depends. If it's a big visual effects shot, it could take me an hour sometimes. I usually spend 2 to 3 days grading the episode before Jeremy comes online. And then we go through it together, and then we finish it with Noreen and spend about 5 hours with him, maybe, on average.
Yeah, that's about right. Why don't I'll stop the screen share just for a second so that Mark and Gavin can talk without being covered up by the screen share.
Okay.
I'll just, I think you might have to unmute yourself, Mark.
Mute myself.
Hello.
All right. Here's Mark Kueper and Gavin Smith.
Hello, everybody. So
Hello,
Gavin
everyone.
and I have this great show that we've been working on for a few years. It's a comic book type script, so it really has given us license to do weird things, and that coupled with a show creator who's really, you know, eager to do just good work that's weird and have it add to the whole experience of the show. Gavin, what do you think?
Well, maybe I'll just go into a little bit of the background about Wynonna Earp. I have a few things written down here, but I can speak to them. I mean, when we started the show, one of the things that stood out to me with the script is that it really doesn't take itself too seriously. And that's one of the things about the show that is very forefront. So it's quite campy, And a lot of the interaction between the characters is what is in the forefront of the show. And we have a wonderful cast on the show who are probably some of the most non-vain people I can imagine. And we push 12 mil, 14 mil lenses right into their face on this show, and nobody seems to bat an eye. So having that kind of license is pretty amazing. And when we started the show, it had a bit more of a traditional look. The look that we were going for was maybe a combination between a couple of shows. One of the shows that I particularly liked was the Nick in its raw, very handheld, rough type of a look. And they just chose some very strange angles for perspectives on the show. And we really use that as a bit of a reference for the show. And that coupled with something like that's a little more serene. Wallander was another reference. And I always use the original Doctor Who, which I loved as a kid. And it just had this feeling to it that the characters are in the forefront, even though you're in a very sci-fi setting. You want something that's just odd, so that when you start that world in that odd space, you don't have to worry about trying really strange things and having them stand out, because you're already there. When we started the look of the show, I originally started with minis because it's a ProRes show. And we used the Leica Summilexes because I had been using those recently and loved the look of them. Partway into season 2, we introduced some of the Leica, the Vantage Ones. And the Vantage Ones have a really, really interesting look. And we loved the look so much, even though we were looking at it for a specific episode, that we ended up adopting those lenses and that look for the entire series from then on. And one of the things I like about those lenses is when you really open them up, because they literally open up to about a T1, every single lens has its own characteristics. So as you start to open them up, they start to fall apart a little bit. You get chromatic aberration, you get very strange bleeding in different parts, particularly for highlights. And what I loved about it is that with natural, pretty much available light, you can paint with these lenses specifically, like without adding a lot of light, maybe a little bit of negative fill, but just a few things, so you're creating enough contrast so that the light parts will bleed into the dark parts. And so we really started to experiment with this a lot. And given the fact that we shoot the show very quickly, it's shot in Alberta in the fall and winter, and literally you lose light by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you have to work very quickly and then know that you're going into a split at the night, and you're getting all your lighting ready for the night stuff while you're still shooting in another location, jumping around from place to place. And the wonderful part of shooting where we were shooting on the ranches and in the foothills and in the Rockies is that you can just see everywhere. So therefore, using big wide angle lenses and spinning them around handheld or a Steadicam or on a techno crane, you can see everything. So we really embraced that. So it posed a lot of challenges for lighting. There's a lot of on-camera lighting. I use a lot of practicals in the shot, and there's a lot of things that need to be controlled. So therefore, we had to come up with a LUT and also a way of working that all of those things would cut together seamlessly between the stuff shot on stage and the stuff shot in location. So when Mark and I started it, we kind of came up with this cross-processed look, a LUT that was probably a little cleaner than it is now. And then over the years, like when I first started, we had probably maybe 5 or 6 LUTs, but we refined it very quickly down to 1. And then with that 1 LUT, we just slowly refined it. I was working with a DIT at the time, and he would do a little bit of adjustments, and then Mark would come back and say, this would work better for Technicolor. So we kind of really came to a point where we refined that LUT. And from then on, I've worked pretty much just straight out of the camera with ProRes, adjusting within this LUT the color temperatures up and down. I would boost it all the way up to 11,000 Kelvin sometimes, because the skies would get so blue in Alberta in the winter that in order to bring any kind of warmth back into the skin, you had to shift it back that way. But there were many things we did, and over the years, it's been very fun to kind of find this space. And one of the greatest things that Mark and I have such a long history of working on things is that we were both trying things and then looking at it together And then I had a lot of trust. So I didn't have to worry about not being able to live grade, not being able to work with a very experienced DIT when I was working in Alberta. It became a nice process that I felt like I was in good hands working with Mark. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Mark?
I could add that I remember in the early days when we hadn't shot anything yet that we were using some Fargo footage. So because you guys were shooting in some of the same locations.
Oh yeah,
we
that's
started
right.
with this cross-process look. And the LUT we ended up with, your number one, which we were using for the dailies, because you didn't have a DIT, it really had to do most of the heavy lifting. It's more baked into that LUT than what we sometimes would normally do. But it's done a good job. It also helps me work faster when I'm doing the completion, because everyone's used to the look of the show already. Most of it's baked in already when we get it here in the shop. So there's no surprises. People get used to the way the offline looks, and we're just tweaking and refining and making it better from there on. And I think if you're doing a show that has a heavy look like that it's important to everybody gets on board with that from the beginning. But it's worked out for this show for sure.
Yeah, one of the challenges too is we had a pretty quick shooting schedule on the show, in that we were 6.5 to 7 days for most episodes. So, which is pretty tight on a show that involves effects and shooting largely on location and sometimes on set. So much of the way the show is shot is dictated by those things. So knowing that, we're gonna have to all jump in trucks and race down to the other part of the ranch and get this shot. Sometimes we'd split up and send off a camera somewhere else while we're doing this. And we had to keep things pretty small, because out on the plains it's really windy. So the advantage to working to one LUT and keeping it as simple as possible on set, because it's not a studio bound show, was really helpful. And then moving on to this type of situation, now that we've launched into remote grading, it's just a dream come true to sit with an iPad and know that everybody else is seeing the same thing. When you're looking at it later, it's an incredible time saver, because if I had the really great graded monitor at home, and then yet the producers are seeing something on a H.264 on their laptop, it's like, well, this doesn't look the same. Well, of course it's not going to look the same. So now having this whole Techstream thing set up, it's just, I love it. I think it's fantastic. And because I'm often not in Toronto, which is my base, it's very good to be able to work with something where everybody's seeing the same thing. So the sessions feel similar to the way they are in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can pull up some stuff.
Yeah, one of the things about these particular episodes, this is the end of season 3. There's a lot of weird skies. They wanted to maintain the weird skies. In the script, something about a blood moon. So, we're doing a lot of, see here, I can show you, without our sky work, it's pretty plain. And this, before this scene, there's a lot of goings on with explaining about what's happening with the sky. So I'm trying to do these keys to just individually try and separate clouds from sky, and just to make it feel a little weirder. I'm gonna go to another shot here. We're maintaining this too here, just for continuity's sake, all these bits as the skies go through. Some of these kind of shots where it's very much, on location, it's very bright outside. We're trying to transition, keep being able to see the actor. We're keying just specific areas of the shot so that we can bring down, add contrast, and, being careful not to go too far. That's going to look like a set. And again, the other bits are of course, trying to get this weird sky that we've been working on.
These are the advantages, Gavin?
Sorry, yeah, yes, they are the Vantages. If I look at this, this looks like it's probably, yeah, the Vantage 25. One of the things that I did too is it's not strictly all Vantage lenses because the Vantage only goes up to the 17.5 in its wide end. So we also worked with Cooke S4s in 16, 14, and 12. And I added a pearlescence filter, pretty heavy pearlescence, in order to get the same sort of softness that you're getting from the wide open Vantages. So that was a way of sort of helping bridge the difference in two different film, like very vastly different lenses, yet maintaining that still kind of soft feeling that they have.
So you would, so if you were going to go to a 14 outside, you would add the pearlescent to make it look more like the Vantages.
Correct. And because the Vantages, like I often, like for example, that's a Vantage. If you go to that next shot there, you'll really notice, because just stop it for a second, Mark. So if you see how much bleeding you're getting there,
Oh, wow.
that's like you get so much if you're wide open and you really have to tone them down. Like that's the 17. So it's right on the edge, but it gets very weird. So to create anything like that with something like a 14 or a 12, you'd have to go to full pearlescence and get something kind of similar. Not exactly, but it's quite similar.
And what just out of curiosity, what else did you compare to filtration wise before you landed on the pearlescent?
Well, I tried a few different things. The reason why I like the pearlescence because it had most of a bleed. So you see, you're really seeing it here, like where that bleed comes through. I was getting more bleed from the pearlescence. Like I tried everything. Like I tried many different things, some classic sauce to some smokes to some like. I went through a variety of things, and the pearlescence just seemed to have that glow and the bleed that I needed. I'm not sure how this is coming up on Facebook for everyone because it's hard to totally see, but on my monitor, I'm working from an iPad here at home, and my image is amazing. So the bleed might look pretty mushy on your low res at home, but what I'm getting from the Techstream looks incredible.
I can see it. I'm looking at the Facebook feed now, and I'm seeing this. The bleed is looking the way I'm seeing it coming through the because I have the Techstream app running on my iPad, which is how.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm comparing the two, and it's actually pretty close.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if we push further into some of the more action sequences there, Mark, you can really kind of see the differences in the lenses. Like when you're working, we had a great focus puller, Corey Budney, working out west, where I was shooting close and on anything that was a bit long, like I'm calling it long for our show, but that was about a 32 was almost the longest lens we were using for close-ups. You could open it up almost to a T1, but then when you worked on the wider end, anything from a 25 to a 17.5, it really starts to fall apart. But I was always playing with that to find that nice edge. Actually, this is a good shot, that two shot there, Mark, that you were on, of them. If you let it play for a moment, it'll tilt down to the hands and you can really see the softness around the hands when they go up against the window. You see that bleed happening there. Let it play for a bit. So it really starts to fall apart, but then you come up to there where there's no highlight around them and they're pretty clear. So it was fun to play with those things. And you can see like they're pretty close to that window behind them, but look how much of a softness you're getting from that super shallow depth of field.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so it was kind of like I chose these sections because there's very minimal lighting in a lot of these. And now this was a set, of course, and we're cutting between a set, a barn that's partly a set and partly a barn that's on location, and then also out on the location. And one of the advantages I found to working with the Vantages is because of the burnout that you get outside and inside with your sets, to me, it looks like you're in the same place. It actually pulls you away from that set-like feel quite a bit. But were it not for the showrunners embracing this look, you wouldn't have that advantage. So it'd be a lot more work for myself on set, in a way, in order to match up the scenes on location to the scenes on the stage.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So maybe I'll turn this over to Mark because I've been talking a lot about the lenses, and he can just show us some of the things that he's doing there.
Well, you wanted to see some action stuff, right? About
Yeah,
these
sure.
lenses as well. Play a little bit here. I know it's going to be steppy, but
I'm just going to see if there's any text here.
you know, we're trying to maintain this part of the sky that, you know, is gonna make it feel like this blood moon, which I mean, as a technique, we're just trying to maybe offset all the blue that's happening with trying to get something happening in the sky that's different.
Are you pushing warmth into that center area, Mark? Is that what you're doing?
I'm making a key, a luminance key in the sky, so that I can warm those sections up.
That's cool.
And because we're, you know, the camera's going 360 degrees around, you know, the whole set here, we're just, I gotta go to a new shot, you know, riding the level of how warm do we want that bit to come through to offset all our blue that's happening here.
And of course,
just as a little change,
right?
know, without it, it's just, sorry, without it, it's perfectly fine. It's just we're trying to add this element of warm that's happening up there, which is, you know, kind of hard to maintain. Sometimes we had nice clouds, so we can play with those and use those. I think on the other side, we have that. It's a little easier to kind of dial it in when you have that. What else is going on here?
I'm just going to answer a couple questions while you're maybe pulling something else up there, Mark. There's a couple.
Here, I'm just going to noodle here because I just realized maybe we could do something more dramatic on some of this stuff. Like bringing in a vignette on the bottom or something like that.
That's cool.
So a couple questions that I have here are, how do you deal with effects with all the bleed of the Vantage lenses? And also with such wide lenses, how were you shooting with 2 cameras? Well, a lot of the time, I'm going to address the camera thing first. A lot of the time with the 2 cameras and using such wide lenses, the A camera would always dominate, but then because the show is predominantly handheld, we would have people hidden around corners and the other camera would step out to try and grab a close-up after we've landed something. There's a lot of stuff on our sets that we use to our advantage to allow the other camera in. Sometimes we went longer lens, but it wasn't always that case. But one camera, maybe it's on the crane and you're landing a big wide shot that comes in close, but then the person goes around a corner and comes into the other camera, for example. So they weren't necessarily always used concurrentently, but they would checkerboard into each other. Addressing the VFX question, much of the time, since this show was shot ProRes high def, a lot of the time when we had a very specific compositing shot, I would sharpen it up. So I wouldn't go as wide open with the Vantage lenses, and we'd bump up to 3.2K. And so that the effects team knew that they were matching back to our original look. So I tried to give them as clean a look as possible. But then again, a lot of the times in the cutting, there might be something come up where they have to work with it. But they did a very good job in kind of masking that. This show is not particularly effects heavy as in post effects. And a lot of the things are eyes and hands and burning elements that are kind of layered on top. So they would add their own softness to that. So I didn't, unless it was something very specific, I didn't have to change things that drastically.
Gavin, do you find that with like in this shot you're sitting on here now, knowing the range you have to play within the camera and knowing what you're going to do with Mark later, do you find that in the interest of speed and like you said, like cameras are dancing in and out of positions, that you maybe don't bring in a bounce card as often as you might have before, because you know that like with that guy with his hat, you're going to like lift his eyes a little bit later and you're not going to have to like basically get bogged down with having to, you know, dance around with more gear as you're trying to get these shots?
100%. In the beginning of the show, when I was starting, I would carve it all up with beautiful, beautiful negative fill and bring all these things in, and then it was just like, oh my gosh, we got to go. And we would literally, and then working with certain directors, it's like, oh, I'm going to see here, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go here, and all over. It's like, okay, well, Mark and I will have our work cut out with that for us, and it's worked out very well. It's kind of, the constraints became an asset. And once I employed the Vantage lenses, they created a whole new thing for me to play with, that it was almost like relighting with the lenses, where I couldn't bring things in. And our locations were so wonderful. The fact that I could see everywhere.
Yeah.
For example, this shot that's come up right now, this is a set. So this is on the stage, but, and I could still shoot it very much the way that I shot out on location, in which we saw 360, because I just blasted the whole thing with lights, surrounded it in the studio, and you could still do the same style of shooting, and it still felt like it the way it did outside. And this is where the Vantages were a real asset, because the light bleed, you can embrace inside and outside, and you can embrace the burnout without it looking out of place.
Certainly, you know, Gavin and I have come up with a good shorthand because of this speed of shooting and the speed we need to keep up with grading as well. And that's, you know, handy when time is the enemy, not just on set, but even in post. So.
And how long would you spend, because I know Joanne was asked that question, how long would you spend like working on an episode before Gavin chimes in, and then the next step of going to the producers?
This show gets 8 hours pre-grade before, and then we usually do a 4-hour review, typically.
And
I wrote that. Gavin,
is also included.
I was just going to say that for myself, often with this show, because it's such a quick turnaround, I'm still shooting when even the pilot comes out.
Wow.
So very rarely have I been able to fly home and deal with it, unless we have a hiatus built in or something. I think which only happened once. Have I been able to come back and be around for a lot of the color grades? And like yourself, Jeremy, I mean, just working a lot. I'm usually somewhere else, so it's difficult. So the advent of all this remote grading and being able to see it this way, it's just wonderful moving forward. As it's relatively new, but man, it's going to be such an asset for future work. And even as we're shooting this right now, Brian had mentioned that this was the 4th season complete. It's actually not complete. We got shut down by COVID, and we're going to be starting back up again. We were shooting in the middle of the winter, and then we're probably going to be picking up midsummer, which is crazy, but it'll be very interesting. And having this now as a way to move forward with it is just going to be terrific.
And I guess, I mean, it's interesting because obviously, like, I'm in Toronto, so, and we're all stuck at home. So for me, having the LG monitor here makes sense. But obviously, as you say, if I was going to be working out of town somewhere and had to kind of take a look at stuff remotely, then this iPad solution is really great, because you cannot be there. I guess the question is like, I guess the Technicolor method is they provide the iPad Pro because it's been calibrated to their system, versus you sending in your own iPad Pro because they want to cherry pick the best iPad Pro to send you, I guess, right?
Well, I elected to do that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say that we've had often, because of COVID and things, and just the number of iPad Pros that we're needing, people have just gone to their local or online and bought the Apple Store, iPad Pro, and then there's just settings that we can get them. I mean, generically coming out of the factory, they're calibrated for Rec 709 very, very, very well. And there's just a bunch of stuff that we need to shut off, the automatic brightnesses and the tone dark mapping and all that sort of stuff. There's just settings that we can send them a little document and say, step by step, shut these things off, turn this on, and we're good to go.
That's cool. Well, it's like what Deluxe did for me, like the LG here, like they calibrated it at Deluxe, but then they sent it to me and they sent me a PDF of like the map of
correct.
Something gets tweaked or
yeah.
Kind of a list of it all.
And of course, we have big plans, obviously, once COVID's over, then there's certainly expansion of the software that's going to happen that's going to allow us to use lots of other devices, you know, beyond the iPad Pros and things. But it was such a great asset to start with, to have a known quantity that was already calibrated, that we didn't have to worry about what someone in Los Angeles with poor bandwidth and Wi-Fi was going to be able to see. Yeah. But, you know, certainly HDR and lots of other stuff is in the work. Apple TVs, etc. All that stuff is all going to be available shortly.
Right.
For myself, once again, traveling to many different places while I'm working, I love this iPad system. I'm presently working on a show with Mark, which I'm not at liberty to talk about right now because it's not released, but working in HDR, but then seeing this SDR image, knowing that everybody else is seeing the same thing, having worked with Mark, knowing that he's basically verifying everything that he's looking at in HDR, I feel in just such a comfortable place, and many of the decisions can be made so quickly because everybody's got eyeballs on it, whether they're in Boston or in Los Angeles or myself working out in Alberta, and we can all see the same image on exactly the same calibrated iPad Pro is so much easier than all those little things that we fuss with because Jeremy and I are looking at a much better monitor than they may be at home. I find it solves a lot of those certainly immediate problems.
Yeah. Well, and even for us, like when we're grading, like, you know, myself, the showrunner, and the VFX supervisor have the LG monitors, but then we have our VFX coordinators and their teams, and our producer who's here in Toronto, our like on-set producer, they're following along on the Streambox app on a regular iPad, just so they can at least, while we're grading and doing our reviews,
yeah,
they know it's not exactly 100% what they're looking at, but at least when we're discussing like, oh, that element needs, like, we have to redo that shot because there's some problem with the render or something, they can see it as we're talking about it. So it's like instantaneous.
Did you want to talk more, Mark, about what you're doing here? You're whipping through
I'm
stuff.
just noodling while we're, you know, kind of rapping about this.
I love the face.
It's always like the more time you get, the better. You can always do more. It's like, you know, someone said once in the suite that lighting's never finished; it's just abandoned.
Yes, that's exactly right. And we still keep lighting until we're actually somebody pulls us away from the screen.
Right. So same with coloring. You could color all day, all night, and still find little things you want to finesse. So it's part of the fun on a show like this, where you could do, you know, just different things. And an action sequence like this, which is not, you know, that crazy, but it's certainly, there's always, every time you see it, there's like something you could change or improve upon.
Yeah. One of the things that's been very nice about this process is that working with Mark, you know, even going into a show, it's one of the first things you ask for. It's like, get your colorist. It's almost as, it's important as your A camera operator or your gaffer, if not more, because it's the thing you have to relinquish, I find, when I'm working off on location, a lot of the control about, because you're just not around. So you have to definitely work with somebody you trust. And as we've gone through this season, Mark and I, in working on things, I'll always ask him, I say, am I giving you enough in the mids here? Am I giving you enough in the underexposure? Do I need to lift it up a bit? I'll ask him questions that gives him more material to work with later, and just make sure that we're coming in at a good place. And as we go into our color sessions, much of that happens again. It's like, could I have done something that would make your job a little bit easier for us both to achieve what we need to achieve here?
It's interesting.
I think that's also why establishing a good LUT to start with, so you know that on set, on the day when you're lighting for something, you could see exactly what is going to be there. And so getting that tonal, you know, not starting with a generic something, customize it for your particular show, so that the showrunners, everyone, like you say, gets used to the look right out of the gate.
Yes, that's another thing. Actually, look out of the gate is a big thing. I find that, you know, you run into it many times when you work on a show, and people are extremely used to seeing what they looked at in the cutting copy or when it's being edited, and they'll always refer back to, well, I really like it to look like it did before. If you never got to put that print on it at the early stage, people get so used to looking at it a certain way that any deviation from that is very difficult to do. So certainly working when you can't do a live grade, working with a really good LUT that you know you can work yourself is great. I mean, it all depends on your budget of your show, obviously, whether you can live grade or more so time to set up what you need to set up in order to get a live grade done quickly. Like, for example, on Wynonna, I'll work with a little Odyssey with a little hood because we have to run off and do shots quickly. And it's got my LUT set up on it, and I will use my aperture motor to adjust to that if we have to do something very quickly and can't get the whole entourage close enough and we're losing the light or whatever.
Yeah, that's an important distinction too. I mean, because you'd mentioned that earlier about, you know, the with your show being daylight dependent, you know, like light fading and having to run off and get shots, you want to not have to drag a whole circus of live grading gear around with you. You want to have some reliable means of looking at it quickly.
Absolutely. So what I usually do is calibrate my monitors. I use some Flanders monitors with my Odyssey and have it looking as close as it possibly can be, and making sure that the waveform is it lines up nicely so that I could send off an operator to go do a shot and they can still look at it knowing that the look is the same. Right.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. But all of that relates back to working with Mark in that the LUT is essential. I light to the LUT. I very rarely go back even to the log anymore unless I'm doing compositing on this show. And I find that just the more I light to it, then I know little adjustments that we need. But we've been working with this one for 2 years, and it's terrific.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that LUT basically like in the camera as you're shooting. It's kind of.
Yes. That's exactly how we do it. And then I'll have it set up, for example, again, if maybe on the dolly or the dolly grip or on, you know, the easy rig monitors set up on the camera assist monitors, if I can't get in there with another one, at least something that's pretty close. We try and match up as many things as we can so I can look at what it's going to look like, even though they're going to flip back and forth on their monitors to, you know, a focusing screen or whatever. I can jump right in there and go, okay, that's fine, that's good.
Right.
And move really quickly.
Right, because you might be like at that moment you're ready to roll. You could be like, you know, on the other side of the set and you got to go, and you don't have time to run back to the other monitors.
Exactly, or the transmitter will be down or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, which happens, you know, even in the mountains. Yeah.
And I mean, the other great thing about, you know, what you're doing and how you're working with available light like this is having the ability to fine tune the color balance of the day as the day changes and clouds come in and out, and, you know, the ambient light gets warmer or cooler. You know, there's not a lot you can really do about that as you're shooting. You kind of have to know you're going to have that control later.
I'm just watching what Mark's doing here. It's
I'm just playing around trying to.
I know, it's great. So there's a question here. I'm trying to follow these questions coming in. It says, I really like that flat look we had before. That's quoting me, I guess. You mean the log footage? I'm not sure I understand this question. I can't remember what I said, to be honest. But
I don't remember that one.
I don't remember it either. Sorry, I can't respond to your question.
Maybe they can re-ask it if they want to clarify.
We're talking about like just the log image is what we're talking about.
I guess like they like the log look.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, then you don't need me. You can just.
Yeah, way to go, Mark. Sorry.
But I mean, it's amazing how, like, what you're doing there, Mark, like just those subtle things that can draw your eye into something in a way that's really subtle, that suddenly got a new focus that you didn't really, maybe wasn't there as much before. I mean, it doesn't really require a lot sometimes to make that little focal point change.
Yeah, exactly.
Often that, I guess. Yeah, and these are the things, the details, when you have the time to kind of just help. And it's story driven sometimes. Sometimes there's like a moment we really have to focus on something, as we've all, been there. It's like we need to emphasize or draw attention to a certain thing in the shot. And
right. Like that reason on the day you didn't see it as much, or it was like a dark thing against a dark thing and you couldn't really pick it up.
Yeah, and again, the shorthand is the key too, right? To be able to look out for things. And Gavin and I, we talked about this for years. It's like, maybe not this show, but another show that's got a lot of over-the-shoulder shots, which is a big TV thing, right?
Mm.
Rose windowing the near side of the camera so that, we don't have to bring in a flag all the time when you're doing those conversations and stuff. So.
Because there is a lot of those shorthands that are time savers on the set. If you know the control you have when you're shooting.
Yeah, it takes time, right?
Yeah, anything that can save time will just give you more of what you need shot by shot, because you can concentrate on what's important.
That's right.
You're not just fixing things, which
Right.
is so much of the case.
Well, that's the great thing about lot building and shooting to a lot that I find the best, is that you do spend, and if it's shot well, you spend all of your grading time finessing instead of fixing. There's a certain amount of matching to do, but with sensors and time of day or whatever. But if you can spend more time finessing and making it great as opposed to fixing, as we all know, it's a time saver. It's going to be better for everybody.
I mean, it's out of curiosity, I guess it's for both Joanne and for Mark, but like, how do you, as far as having working this way now, being not at the office, so to speak, like what particular challenges or differences in that way of working that you've had to embrace in the last 10 weeks?
Myself is I had to work on a Resolve instead of the Lustre, which I've been working with for 15 years. So that was a learning curve. And that's specifically because, working from home and Techstream, it made it doable. And HDR and built-in CMU as opposed to external CMU, which is Lustre's thing, and that's why I'm talking Dolby Vision right now.
Right.
It just allowed us to, because these things are in a lot of people's houses, it made sense that this to pick up a system and throw it here, which we already had the systems, and just saying it's a little easier move. I'm working on a Mac, now instead of the Lustre is a Linux-based system. The other challenges are usually, keeping up with the changes. When everyone's working together, you do have virtual meetings, you have all these things all the time, but especially with VFX heavy shows, as you know, things are changing every minute, in terms of the timelines and re-edits, and it's just being organized and being able to stay on top of things is the challenge.
Well, I guess that's the thing, is it's not as easy for someone just to pop into your suite and look over your shoulder and tweak the timeline or drop a shot in or whatever, now that everyone's isolated for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there, because essentially if you figure, whether it's Deluxe's building or Technicolor's building, it's still the engine that's running everything. It's just being able to keep up with, plus, we're less people working right now, so fewer people are doing more things, and until we all get up to speed on things, and we're also all trying to figure out what's going to happen in the next few months. Are we going to keep doing this? How long before people are shooting again?
Right.
People have been talking about that for weeks, months. Projecting when we're going to get busy again. We're busy now. We're still grading everything that's been shot last year, except for maybe some of the few episodes of Wynonna, and we all have stuff on the go, several shows. That's going to end eventually. you know, when are we going to get back in the building? Are we going to stay here? There's so many balls in the air about what we're going to do. Although this technology really lets it happen wherever we're going to go. And like, even if we do go back to working in an actual building of hundreds of people, Gavin and yourself will still be out in the field or in your homes or want to use this tech. I think it's that part I think will stick around, whether or not we're here or somewhere else.
How about for you, Joanne? How do you find as far as just like the challenges or differences for you?
Right. I guess I was pretty lucky because I was on a resolve when I left, and I was able to bring my full system here. The main thing was getting my tablet, and then really it was just logistics. Like I had to figure out how to hang up some tab curtains, black coat. Like there's a lot more light today, but normally I'm working in a darker environment, so it's that type of thing. Just getting everything in order that way. Cam, my husband, he built me a wall, an insulation wall, so we could drown out the sound of the resolve, because it's just in the room behind me here, and it's quite loud. Things like that. Mainly it's been just trying to communicate more with mods, like we're on the phone constantly, texting, just like Mark said, because it's visual effects heavy, we're always, you know, focused on getting all the latest visual effects and the mats. And you know, sometimes if there's a hiccup, then we just re-export, and then we get James, our engineer. He's been great. So it's been actually surprisingly seamless working like at home because of James and Jerry Wolf helping me out. So I don't have them. I had to put my big girl pants on, and I've had to plug in cables. That part's been rewarding. Like, wow, it actually works. So I've had to plug in things to do that type of thing, which normally I don't have to deal with. So yeah, it's not having that crutch at work where you can just pick up the phone and call Jerry or James, that type of thing. So, but actually it's been great. It's just really just communicating more with everyone, like at Deluxe. Right? And Gary's been great as well, making sure we have everything we need.
How about
Joanne brings up a good point. We have to be our own IT people, our own engineers, our own assistants, our own everything. So, but you know, we're learning and we're doing it.
Yeah, a little bit more troubleshooting at times, but it's kind of fun. It's definitely different.
Well, I mean, I guess for Gavin and I, the good thing is that it hasn't really changed how we do things ultimately. It's just, because we're still communicating in the same way. It's just, we're just not in the same room anymore. And I guess Gavin may not have even been in the same room anyways.
Yeah. No, it's great. I find that just this system that I've been working with Technicolor on another show, to have all eyeballs on exactly the same image, it is incredible, because no matter how much you can explain to somebody, well, no, it doesn't look exactly like this, you're not getting the same image I am. Just eliminating that whole factor and being able to just all look at the same thing at once to do, final passes on a grade or, a review is fantastic.
Yeah.
Collaboration.
For Brian and Gary, how's anything for you that's changed how you guys have to manage your jobs?
You know what? Both Joanne and Mark echo some of the challenges we had to go through. It's changed slightly in that, there's a lot more communication, a lot more coordination that has to happen. As both the colorists mentioned, the team is spread out. So some of the native support that you would have in the facility that would make your life a little bit easier is just not there anymore. So there's a certain level of planning that has to happen. One of the things that we wanted to make sure is that, the communication between the creatives and all that was seamless. And I think that was the thing that we wanted to achieve more than anything else, is to, while we were all working remotely in different locations, is to make sure that you guys, both you and Gavin, wouldn't feel any of that. What Joanne has mentioned is she works so closely with Mott's, because when you're at the facility, they're right next door to each other. Well, Mott's is somewhere in Richmond Hill right now. and Joanne is downtown and is coordinating all of that. So, you know, it's different. I wouldn't say that it's, you know, I wouldn't say that it's bad. I would say that, you know, the facility more functions like a hub. You know, we talk back to the facility. The incredible thing for us as well, you know, we have an incredible engineering team that really puts this together and is making it happen. So I would say probably the biggest challenge I find is things tend to be a little bit slower. So we ask the clients to be a little bit more patient because it takes a little bit more time to get certain things done that you could have done fairly quickly when you're back at the shop.
Yeah.
I echo that too. I think that certain functions and certain positions I don't think will ever come back to the building. I mean, I think that travel time and just the stress of, you know, working, you know, at home that's relieved. Some of those functionality, I mean, we have obviously such a large VFX presence in the world and things, and those were some of the first positions I think that were able to work remotely fairly easily because of cloud instances and everything that's happening in that world right now. It's a little more difficult when you're into, you know, final grading where you need to have real-time playback and you need to have those sort of functions that, you know, normal internet's difficult to manage and things. I mean, one of my job functions is working with the DPs on set, and I like to go on set. I like to be able to, you know, talk face to face with them. Obviously, without production, that's not happening and things. Once that comes up, you know, how that looks, is everyone going to be in hazmat suits? We don't know, but I don't think we're going to come back into the same world that we were before. I think a lot of stuff will change. And I think, honestly, in many cases, as long as we still have the same client experience, et cetera, it's all going to be good.
I think you're right, Brian. This kind of reminds me of
maybe better client experience, you know?
Probably. I think this kind of,
Yeah.
I think it will change indefinitely, at least speed up this digital kind of work from home situation as well. I think it feels a little bit like when we were migrating from that tape format to a more file-based workflow. And we had a loss of HDR tape when Japan went through that tsunami. This feels like that, like it's going to just accelerate what we've already started. So, you know, yeah, more to come. We'll see what that looks like. I don't know if the norm will be what we considered the norm before. It's going to be somewhat different.
Yeah.
I think,
like I say, we see, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, we certainly see, you know, way more additional features being added to the Techstream that's going to allow us to do other functionality. We have clients saying, hey, can't I review audio on this? Can't I do Atmos through this? Because the picture's so great. I want to be able to review all this stuff all at the same time. You know, so it's going to have ramifications, I think. We've had art directors go, oh my God, I want to be able to send this stuff to my DP or my producers, and we have a real-time chat. I mean, this kind of Zoom thing and Teams, Microsoft Teams, I think it's been a huge salvation for a lot of us to collaborate and get on group chats every day, not only from the client side, but internally. As you mentioned, it's very difficult to keep up with all the little wee nuances of all the details of a lot of moving cogs.
I find that certainly moving forward, one of the hardest things when you're on a tight schedule and you're working on an 8-month show and you're shooting, and then, for example, I'm off in Alberta and I have to fly home to do the color corrects and then fly back and start shooting again. This, just being able to do this alone, and the sleep saved and the years back on my life is totally worth it. It's just it's a game changer, really.
I mean, we used to send, you know, H.264s and things out to clients for them to review. And then again, it was always the question about, gee, was their iMac Pro properly calibrated? Do they have these details? Do they have that? And again, it's the non-real time. It's off hours. You don't have the collaboration that you have with the showrunners and the producers, the post supervisors and producers. It's enabled all this to continue.
Yeah, that's why I love the system that we've been working with, when it's just everybody gets the same one, exactly the same calibration, don't touch it, send everything in, and you're talking with people in several different cities around North America and getting the work done quickly. It's great.
It's so true. Well, maybe unless anyone has anything else to add, I feel like maybe we can wrap it up. I think we've answered everybody's questions so far that have come in.
Good.
Does anybody have any final thoughts?
No, I just can't wait till the new HDR version that I can see on an iPad.
You'll have to have two of them, though, right? One for SDR and one for HDR. Yeah.
Well, thanks
Yeah,
thanks everybody for being part of this. I know this was actually a fair bit of work it took to get us to this session because there was so much to coordinate technically, but we got it really going. And so thanks to Brian and Mark and everyone at Technicolor, and Kate, Martin, James at Deluxe, and Gary, Joanne and Gary Mueller, our post supervisor at Deluxe as well. You know, and Christina, who's actually not visible here, but she's at home feeding us stuff. So thanks everybody for that. It's been it's really good. I know we wanted to do this for several weeks, and it's still, the timing of it, it's great because people are still new to this who haven't actually entered into this technology yet. So it's good for those people to see this. And I guess normally right now I would mention the next week's session. We're not actually going to have a next week's session. We're going to wait till the 18th of June, which will be a session with Ari. So next week, what we're going to do is, I'm not sure how many people are aware that the CSC has a diversity committee. It was formed earlier this year in February. There's been sort of parts of it that have been in place since before that. It's in the process of being kind of added to. And we thought that next week we would hold a more kind of like a private webinar, like a collaboration effort where we're going to bring in our members of color, members from that community to hold a session to sort of talk about ways that the CSC can be more involved, or to do things to kind of inclusiveness through this diversity committee, which is new. So those details will be coming shortly. It's in the process of being put together. So there'll be an email that will go out to our members, which will kind of make this a private invite. It'll be kind of an internal discussion, but it'll be for all of our members to take part in, and something that we can use to move forward with. So look for that in the next couple of days. Susan will be sending out an email about that. But once again, thanks everybody for being here. It's been great, and I look forward to the future of doing more of this kind of stuff.
Thank you, Jeremy, for all your hard work.
Thanks very much.
Together.
Thanks to the CSC. It's been very good.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see you guys in the real world, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's
Good
hope
to
so.
see you guys. Stay safe.